Since the dawn of time, man has been curious. And for almost as long, the Vibes Broadcast Network has sought the truth. Investigate, discuss, explore. Okay, maybe in other episodes, but this one is just listen to the vibes.
The views and opinions of our guests may not necessarily reflect those of the host or the Vibes Broadcast Network. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. And I have here Miss Bonnie Hewitt, and we're going to get to know her and have a great conversation. From what I understand, she is an anxiety coach, which that's a subject that is near to me. And well, Bonnie, I'm going to let you have the stage and tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. So I guess I'll start back in childhood and kind of what brought me to this point. So I was labeled high strung as a small child.
Mm-hmm.
Keyword for, hyper or anxious, or back in the 70s, things weren't called the same things, right?
Right.
And over the years, I also developed depression, and I saw a psychiatrist, psychologist as a kid and whatnot. My mom was chronically ill, so there was some other stuff going on in the home. And I'm going to be honest, I don't remember a whole lot of my childhood. I blocked a lot of it out. I had some trauma early on. I remember bits and pieces when I have conversations with people, mostly the good stuff, right? But in high school, I ended up having a lot of stomach problems, which later I learned was IBS. But I was put on medication at 17 for what I thought was for those stomach problems. And here I found out a couple of years later that they were antidepressants. And honestly, that kind of started the medication roller coaster for me. I had kids fairly young. I was 21 when I had my oldest, and had some postpartum depression, probably stemming from the abuse that I suffered from his father, and kind of a mix of postpartum and kind of some PTSD from that. And that's kind of when the medications took a turn. So back then I didn't have a psychiatrist. I had your family doctor gave you something to make you feel better. And then I had my second child a couple of years later, and I developed full-blown postpartum depression. Was having there's trigger words here, but suicidal thoughts and ideations and feelings and whatnot. And rather than the internet was still kind of in its infancy at that point. Rather than trying to get off the medication and see if that would help, I ended up in the self-admitted to a psychiatric ward, and they gave me 3 or 4 different things in there. And all I knew at 23 was I wanted to feel about 23 or 24 is I wanted to feel better, right? That's why we go to the doctor, want to feel better and kind of get on with our lives. And so I wasn't in the headspace at that point that something needed to be removed. That wasn't even on my radar. And that's when things kind of got really out of control, I guess you could say, with the medication. But I didn't even realize it at the time because I'm raising kids. I went back to school. I was trying to work, all of these different things. And I just wanted to be able to function. So every time I go to my doctor and say, okay, I'm having trouble with this, or I'm having trouble with that, it was add another med, take a med away, increase this one, decrease that one. It was just it was literally a roller coaster of up and down. And unfortunately, I felt I would feel better for a while and then come crashing down. So I was then diagnosed with bipolar disorder because I was having these highs and lows. I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, OCD, PTSD, pages of diagnoses. And I really had it in my mind that I was never going to get better. I was going to be on medication for the rest of my life. And that I really had no control over kind of what was happening. It was like I was fully reliant on this medication. I did
Yep.
go to therapy, but it was, and I didn't know this till 15 years later, it was talk therapy. So I would go in there and I would vent and get stuff off my chest, which is great, except I wasn't learning how to change anything, or that I could change how I was feeling and how I was behaving. And I know that sounds ridiculous to a lot of people, but when you have blind trust in your doctors and your medical team, and you're not making any, you feel like you're not making any progress, and you don't have anyone in your sphere of influence, basically, that's suggesting to you, maybe you should try this, or could you try that? I hear a lot of people complain that people are suggesting things to them. And I really wish, well, I wish and I don't wish, had I not gone through all that, I wouldn't be where I am now.
Right.
But it would have been nice if somebody had said, do you think you should try this, or maybe see a different doctor, or see, I honestly just had blind trust. I thought he knew what was best for me because he was a doctor and I was a patient, and I was just going to do what he told me, so that I could keep raising my kids, keep going to work, keep making the money, keep paying the bills. I just literally day after day after day was just trying to survive at that point. And my condition, they just progressively got worse. In 2009 or 10, I think it was 2009, somewhere around there, I was actually approved for electroshock therapy. So that's how severe my conditions had gotten. I didn't go through with it because I didn't have anybody that I could trust to stay with my children for anywhere from 3 to 15 months in the recovery process. So I didn't go through with it. I'm really glad that I didn't. I have someone near and dear to me that went through that, and I saw what it did to this person. It helped this person in some respects, but I also saw some of what it really did to this person. And it's a very hard thing to come back from. It's not an exact science. And when you go in and mess around with the brain, it's a dangerous kind of thing to do. So in 2011, I was a single mom. I had been a single mom for a few years. I was raising my 2 kids. They were 9 and 11 at the time. And I was working from home during the summer. I was in accounting, and my oldest is on the spectrum. So I was managing all his care and his services that were coming in 4, 5, 6 days a week sometimes. Right. And he was having a heightened difficult time at that point. And one afternoon I started having chest pain, and his therapist was due to come. And I was like, okay, I started a new antibiotic, and I was like, I'm allergic to everything else under the sun at this point. I was like, I'm going to take some Motrin, take some Benadryl, wait for his therapist to come see how I feel, and then figure out what to do after that. And it just kept getting worse. So I ended up calling their father, and I was like, I need you to meet me at the emergency room. I'm going to go get checked out, see what the heck is going on. My chest hurts really bad. And I didn't make it all the way to the emergency room. I had the kids in the car. I had to pull over, and within about 5 to 7 minutes of pulling over, I was completely paralyzed.
Oh no.
I had contracted something called a rare illness called Guillain Barre Syndrome, which attacks your immune system and your nervous system. And it's now making its headlines on the news because it's not going to get into this part of it, but it's related to the vaccine is causing some people to have this. Mm-hmm. And the paramedics thought I had taken a drug overdose because I could hear and I could see, like I could sense what was going on. I could feel, but I couldn't respond in any way, shape, or form. I couldn't talk. I couldn't move. I couldn't nod my head or anything. So I ended up in the hospital and go through the whole battery of tests. They found out it wasn't drugs, and trying to kind of really figure out what the heck had happened to me. I went through batteries and batteries of tests, and they ended up saying it was this Guillain Barre Syndrome. And then I spent the next, I think it was like 2 weeks or week and a half, 2 weeks, something like that, in the hospital in rehab, learning how to walk and talk and eat and move. And I had no reflexes. I couldn't hold up my body weight. I mean, I had literally just had a full body reset is what it was kind of like. It's taking me like back to infancy. And that really, I call that like the first part of my healing journey. I also tell people that it should have been a wake-up call, and it really wasn't. I was hard-headed, and when I came home, I was like, oh, that was a blip. That was strange. I'm going to keep healing, and I'm going to go back to work and move on with my life because, again, I have kids. I need to pay bills. I need my job.
Of course.
And unfortunately, as a society, that's what can happen. Is we get so caught up in what we think needs to happen all of the time, or just stuck in a survival mode that we can't see anything else. We're not taking care of ourselves. I was not taking care of myself at all at that point. I was on a lot of different medication. I was pumping caffeine like it was water so that I could take care of my kids and do my job. I spent, 11 hours a day doing 6 hours worth of work because I've got, kids running around. And I know this is more familiar to people now. They're going, oh yeah, I totally understand. Back then, this wasn't really a thing. You know what I mean? Working from home with your kids was not really a thing. And so, yeah, it took me a good 5 or 6 more years before I started to realize, like, maybe something else needs to happen. Like I tried to go back to my job, and I eventually got let go a couple of months later because my cognitive damage was so bad. I couldn't do my job as an accountant. And ended up on disability, and kind of like, okay, now what? In 2012, I guess it was, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia in 2013. Well, that was what ended up happening. It was really strange. So I get this diagnosis of Guillain Barre, and then 3 months later, I go for a follow-up with a neurologist, or I think it was a neurology specialist. And he's like, there's no possible way you could have Guillain Barre. And I'm like, okay, great. And at that point, it didn't really matter to me to press the issue because I had already been through what I thought was the worst of it. But as things kind of evolved over the next, 8 or 9 years, it was quite evident that in fact, it was, and I must have just healed enough in that period of time that I wasn't showing the symptoms that they typically look for at that, 3-month mark or whatever it was. Right. But yeah, so I was diagnosed with fibro. Then I had my third child, surprisingly, in 2013. 2016, after I had him, I got diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. 2016, I had our fourth child. And that was about when I was pregnant with him. He's a complete miracle. I won't go into all the specifics, but there's no way on, and in scientific terms, like, he really shouldn't have made it here. I don't know how that happened. So quite a shock to everyone, including the medical staff. But it was when I was pregnant with him, my husband was working, I was unable to work. I was kind of like, I need to do something because we were drowning as far as financially. Fourth child, I'm like, we're already not making ends meet. Just to put it nicely. I mean, paying this one month and paying that one the next month just to keep them kind of both on. But like, that's when I kind of started looking into, like, what can I do to try to bring a little bit in, whether to pay one bill a month or something. What are my kind of capabilities? And that was when I started Posh Notions, which has been my brand now for the past five years. And now it's interesting because I'm just kind of transitioning out of that. So I don't know if you have any questions. I'm gonna take a pause. I know that was a lot of information.
Oh, no. I'm fascinated because I'm seeing some slight parallels to a lot of things that I've gone through myself. And I try to be transparent myself when I'm on the show, because I don't want anybody to feel sorry for me. I just think that there's somebody out there that's gone through something similar to me, that there is hope. Um, I, for one, I've suffered depression most of my life. I believe that really escalated in my teenage years, but when I was about 8 years old, I was molested. And like you, I just kind of blocked that part of it out of my mind. I do remember the good things that, the fun stuff that happened back those days, but I don't think anybody understands unless they've gone through it. And that just kind of kept bubbling up under the surface until finally one day it just erupted. And then I actually remembered exactly how it happened. And um, it it took a breakdown for me to actually start taking care of the problems. But like you, I trusted these doctors. I trusted everything they say. I thought I had to take medication to take care of these problems, but it seems like the more medicine they give you, the more problems you have. you get
Yes.
you can get a good therapist that can help talk to you, but I don't think they really help you to overcome these things.
I want to put a pin. I don't mean to interrupt you.
No.
What
Go
I
ahead.
learned about this, and again, it took, so my son was in therapy. My daughter went to therapy because my husband and I split up for 6 years
Right.
and then got back together. That's hence the 2 more kids. But so my son went and my daughter both were in what's called cognitive behavior therapy, where they literally help you walk through step by step a situation that happens or a theoretical situation and work through how could you handle this better? What could you have said differently? All of the, so it changes the wiring.
Yes.
I did not know, even with my son and daughter, I thought this was how kids therapy went. I did not know that this was something that was available for adults. So I never even asked about it. So my son was in that from age 5. I was maybe, how old would I have been? 26. Had I known that this was a thing, I could have gotten myself better help much earlier to change what was kind of going on. Right. So I just wanted for your guests to know there are multiple, since then I've learned there are multiple different types of therapists. There's EDMR, there's cognitive behavioral, there's I can never say this, neuro-linguistic programming, which I'm actually training to learn how to do. So go ahead, awesome. Continue. But it sounds like you and I both had talk therapy, which is literally vent and go home with your problems. Vent and go home with your problems.
My suggestion to people is to do your research before you go to these doctors, because there were some that's all they would do is they would talk, they'd let you vent, and they'd say, okay, here's a prescription, I'll see you next week. And I moved. I used to live in the Houston area, and I moved up here close to Austin. And there was one therapist that I had there that was actually started doing that, talking me through scenarios and, how do you react to this? How do you react to that? And I am not a doctor. I have to stress that for, YouTube and all the other platforms. So you talk to the experts. I'm just telling you what worked for me. I started meditating. And I would think of what's the worst that can happen when I'm getting into this situation. Like if I was going to go into a crowd, or I used to not even be able to watch fireworks and enjoy them because I'd freak out. And I talking myself through it, reassuring myself that everything's going to be fine. I was able to gradually get off these medications, and I continue to do these things. And, just on the way, wherever I'm going, I'm going to get into a crowd. Everything's going to be fine. Nothing bad should happen, that kind of thing. Once again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not telling everybody to do this. That just worked for me.
That's beautiful. And that's exactly some of the stuff that I teach. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist, but like you, I am taking what I've learned and what's helped me. And the only reason we were, maybe not for you, but the only reason I was able to learn these things was because somebody else shared the information with me. Not a doctor, not a therapist, not a professional. Somebody was willing to say, hey, this really worked for me. And I was open enough and willing enough to listen and say, I'm going to give that a shot. It sounds like you were using a little mix of the meditation and then like a graded exposure therapy, which just means exposing, you may already know what this means, but it means exposing yourself to something a little bit at a time.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So that you're not jumping into a situation where your body's, feeling it's going to be traumatic. And so that was a great combination. And I'm really glad you were able to use that and that it worked for you. But you have to start with that open mind and that kind of desire to want to feel better, right? It's that decision to feel better. And then what can I do about this? What can I try kind of thing?
Now, there's something else that I did that really helped. And I'm not saying that this is, you can actually do this and it's true. I'm just saying the scenario that I was in, it helped me, was a past life regression. I say, I'm not saying that it's, an actual thing, but for me, it seemed real. And I pictured myself as somebody else. This is a situation, and being out kind of outside, looking at yourself in a different, or looking at somebody else and saying, hey, this is the way you should handle it. It's almost like when you watch a television show and you see the protagonist is getting into a situation and you're like, you should do this. Right. And so it worked for me. Once again, not a doctor. I'm not saying it's going to work for everybody. I'm just saying this is something that I was able to experience. There are good hypnotherapists out there that can help as well. Mm-hmm. I guess the suggestion of being able to handle things and really rationalizing the situation you're fixing to get into, it did wonders for me. I'll just say that.
That's phenomenal. I'm really glad to hear that. And I just wanted to point something out. None of us are doctors, but the doctors here, especially Western medicine doctors, for the most part, they're trained in the art of medicine. They are medical doctors. They are trained to, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I am not demonizing. I also have a rheumatologist. Mm-hmm. My body does not handle medications of any kind, whether they be psych meds or rheumatology meds. I can tell you a wonderful story about the rheumatology meds I've been on. My body rejects them all. I'm allergic to, I think, 9 out of 10 antibiotic groups.
Oh, wow.
And it finally got to a point for me in 2019, actually. So this wasn't that long ago. After taking something called Humira, which is a biologic drug for my condition.
Right.
So I have rheumatoid arthritis. It had moved into my spine. I literally broke down and panicked because I had a 2-year-old and 5-year-old at the time. I was like, I need my spine. Like, I've already gone through this whole recovery process from being paralyzed with my other 2 being young. I need to do whatever it takes to make sure that I'm able to at least do what I want to do with them. So preventing it at all costs to me was not that being in a wheelchair is the worst thing in the world. I don't want anybody to think that I think that. But for me, if I can prevent being stuck in any situation, period, mm-hmm. I'm going to try to prevent it. And that's why I took the Humira, and it caused, I remember, so this was only a year after I had quit my psych meds. Mm-hmm. I didn't even get to that part of the story. I'm kind of jumping around. I apologize. But okay. It was like a year after that, and I started having anxiety, severe anxiety again, after not having any issues with my anxiety for like a year. Mm-hmm. And I kept getting brushed off because I've got this 35-year history of depression and anxiety. And she's like, of course you got anxiety. You've been diagnosed with anxiety. I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, only when I take this do I feel like I'm going to have a panic attack for 2 days straight.
Right.
And it finally got to the point where I was like, look, I really love and respect you as a doctor, but I'm not taking this anymore. This is it. That was only one part of the side effects. It literally was wrecking my life. But I'm like, I'm like, this isn't worth, like, it sounds bad, but this isn't worth not being in a wheelchair, because I still feel stuck because I can't, I'm paralyzed with fear. Like, I can't do anything. I can't go anywhere. It was worse to me to feel in that anxious state. But again, they're medical doctors. They're trained in medicine. They're not trained in yoga. They're not trained in, Kundalini exercises. They're not trained in meditation. A lot of them do use that and reference that and kind of help their patients with it. I remember my psychiatrist once told me, you should try yoga. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, yoga's exercise. Like, okay, how's that going to help me? Because he didn't even explain. He was like, just try yoga. I'm like, I'm 8 months pregnant. There's no way in hell I'm getting on the floor or trying to balance on one foot. Like, not right now. I worked up to that after the fact, but I didn't know that yoga was this whole experiential spirit. I mean, there is the exercise portion of it, and it does help your body get strong, but there's also a whole spiritual and calming element and focus element related to meditation that yoga was kind of built for. And again, I take it upon myself at this point that I was so used to just taking the medication. I felt like I couldn't live without it. And having something like that at that point kind of suggested to me was like, it didn't make sense. Right.
Yeah.
And I wasn't quite ready. I just wasn't ready to hear it, to be honest with you. But yeah, I think we're going to see a shift. We're starting to see a shift in the types of treatments people are looking for. I think for a long time, I think for the past probably 30 years or so, we have all gotten very accustomed to quick fixes and not undoing the damage that caused the problem in the first place, really addressing the root cause. And that's what I help people with. And I'm hoping that that's the people that I've learned this from do and help people with, is getting to the root cause of what's going on. Because unfortunately, if you don't get to that root cause, the problems are just going to keep coming up over and over and over again. And I'm not saying you have to identify what set off your anxiety, or did you have a specific incident that, kind of did that cause something, but your body behaving in a way that is making you feel sick or is making you hurt is a huge, giant, like, red light going, hey, pay attention to me. I'm suffering and you're not taking care of me. And I'm going to keep making you feel this way until you kind of pay attention and take care of the problem. Otherwise, we would get on meds and we would be fine. We could stop taking them after a month or 2 months or 6 months or whatever it is. They're symptom management, really, is what they are. They're not cures or remedies. They're just symptom control. So that's why a lot of people get off of them and they're like right back to where they were when they got on, unfortunately.
I feel like society is programming us to not take personal accountability for ourselves. Yes. And these medications and other things have become a crutch. It's like, oh, poor me, I'm a victim. I refuse to be a victim anymore. I've lived that for too many years of my life. And now that I've taken control of my life, things are just opening up for me. And I don't think people understand how important it is to have good nutrition. I lost 70 pounds and that changed things drastically for me. I told you before that I was on insulin, and then, that they went from insulin to, as a matter of fact, I was taking insulin and 2 different other medications for my diabetes. And now I'm down from taking, what was it, 2,000 to 1,000 to now 500 milligrams of metformin, all because I've changed my eating habits. And I would like to do more exercise than what I am, but there are exercises for people that aren't as mobile. I remember my daughter used to sit with my grandfather, and they would watch that Sit and Be Fit.
Sit Be Fit. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
I mean, I've had 2 spinal surgeries. The first one, I had a therapist that would come and help me do these exercises. And I mean, here I've got a spinal condition. I can't, lift weights and do all those things. But there's you're just trying to balance your body. That's exercise.
Mm-hmm.
People do not, that you think of, just lifting your leg and doing this. That sounds simple. You try doing that after about 10, you're going, oh my God, I'm burning here, but taking that accountability and actually trying to do something. Don't let this world tell you that you're a victim. You don't have to be. I think it's sad, but I see too many people with this feel sorry for me attitude. And I don't want anybody to feel sorry for me. I've had spinal surgery. Okay. I was in a wheelchair, and occasionally I have to use my cane, but for the most part, I'm mobile again. It's like you, arthritis. I got a degenerative disease in my spine, and
me too.
I mean, I know eventually down the road there's going to be another surgery, whatever, but don't give up. Keep moving forward. Don't look at it as a setback. I look at it as it's something that's making me stronger. When you break a bone and it grows back, it actually heals up stronger than what it was before you broke it. So that's kind of like me. Okay, I broke a little bit, but now I'm mending. I'm going to be stronger. I'm going to move ahead and pass on as much wisdom as I can and help somebody else in this situation, which is why whenever I saw your profile and what you do, I was like, oh, I have to have this person on my show, because if you are doing exactly unbreakable, right? Unbreakable. You're doing something that is, like I said, near to me. I've suffered a lot of these things, and I take advice from folks because I don't have all the answers. So I try to take a little bit from everybody that I talk to. And I appreciate you. I don't want to monopolize the time, so I'll let you go
Oh
back.
no, hey, we're good. We're good.
So you have a website, correct?
I do. It's BonnieRoseTheACoach.com. And the easiest way, you can go there and people can check it out. I've got there's a spot for a free session to test drive to see if we're a good match. Mm-hmm. And I kind of skipped a part.
That's okay.
It kind of explains how I ended up doing what I'm doing now. So I was in accounting, and then I built this business, Posh Notions. In 2016, I started that, and it was a branded apparel business, I made these. This is made from my Unbreakable Stories campaign that I started in 2019, which just got rebranded and revamped with a partner, thank God, because I had to put it on hold because I was not healthy enough to do it on my own at that point. In 2017, after going into my doctor, my psychiatrist for years, complaining about the same stuff, I got into a point where I was raging about things like dishes. I was trying to overcome these other illnesses, right? And I didn't know how to ask for help properly, because I had spent my entire life doing everything on my own, independently, even as a child, was taking care of other people, starting in childhood. So when I got to a point where I physically needed other people to help me, I wasn't so good at asking for help, and I was getting really frustrated.
That's hard to admit.
Very resentful, and like, well, I've done all this stuff for you, and you can't, that I was not in a great. But again, I had to kind of go through that to learn what I needed to learn to be in the position I am today. And I'm a hard, stubborn head, so At least historically I was. So I had to kind of go through that whole process. But I went in and I was like, I'm getting angry about the dishes and I'm yelling about this and I'm yelling about that. And I wasn't getting any sleep at this point. I had 4 kids and 2 of them were still little. Actually, my youngest was only like a year old at that point. I think I was still might have been nursing him even. And he said, my doctor says, well, it could be, and I'm not going to mention the medication name because I know it helps a lot of people.
Yeah.
It could be this one medication. And I'm like, I've been taking this for 15 years and I have been coming in here for 15 years, every 3 months, telling you I'm having these problems. And they've been getting, and then it was like this light bulb went off and I was like, I effing quit. I quit. I'm done. I was like, I am done. And it was like something came through me at that point. Like it wasn't even me speaking. I was like terrified and liberated and took back my power all in the same 30 seconds.
Wow.
Where it was just like, thank you for your service. I'm out of here. It was funny because 6 months prior to that, I was having trouble getting my medications from them because of some logistic issues. And I was having breakdown after breakdown going, what am I going to do if I can't get these? I can't live without this. I can't function without this. Like I was fully 100% in on these meds was the only thing keeping me somewhat stabilized. And I was on a little, maybe 12 or 13 different medications when I went in there that day.
Wow.
Now, I am also not suggesting to anybody to quit these kinds of meds cold turkey. I had been titrated on and off of a lot of them because of pregnancy, and was careful about actually getting them out of my system. I, at that point, had taken over, I think, 35 different medications over the course of a 20-year period-ish. But like you said, I was like, I didn't say I'm not going to be a victim, but I think something clicked that day that was like, this isn't working for me. You know, I don't know what's going to happen on the other side, but I know this isn't it. Like this, you know, and I was polite about it. Like I wasn't, maybe not as polite as I could have been, but I was kind of in shock that this was kind of happening, you know, disbelief that like, you're kidding me that you're not just now saying this to me about this medication. And I even took that through pregnancy because it's considered safe, or the safest, I should say. So it was just like, okay, so what evolved from that, like, and why I wanted to go back to that was when you said things were opening up for you. The instant I said that and I went home, I started attracting these people, and YouTube videos were popping, and I was not a YouTube person. I went on YouTube, look up how to fix our washer or something, and all of a sudden Tony Robbins is on there, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And that started this whole, like, I went from him to Gary Vaynerchuk to, if you're not in the entrepreneur space, Gary Vaynerchuk is a really, really cool, humble entrepreneur who's done amazing things for people. And it just kind of tumbled, and I met now one of my best friends who reintroduced, and I say reintroduced because sometimes we have to have multiple touch points on something or hear it multiple times before we actually pay attention to it. And I had heard of EFT tapping, and as many times I heard it before, I was like, okay. It didn't make any sense why that was kind of like the yoga, like why that related to me. But when she brought it up and explained to me what it was, and I was now on this journey of like, how do I manage my life without medication? I was like, all right, yeah. And I tried that. I love EFT tapping. Brad Yates is my absolute favorite. So if you're looking to learn about EFT, he's a very down to earth guy. It's not like a super spiritual woo-woo kind of practice. He's very kind of pragmatic about it. He's also a great guy. I've talked to him several times on Instagram. So there was that, and then opportunities just started popping up, things that I had never even, like, I didn't even know entrepreneurship culture was a thing. Like, here's me trying to start up this little small business, and nobody around me is a business at that time. Like in my physical sphere was running a business or starting a business.
Right.
Friends were dropping off by the handfuls because you get sick and then you have kids at the age that I was at. People are like, I don't have a use for you, kind of thing. And I realized at this point too, what a blessing that was, because unfortunately, most of those people are still exactly where I left them a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
And no, and I'm not, it's not a judgment thing. It's just, I know where I want to go and what I want to do and who I want to help. And, it's not about being rich and famous. It's about how many people's lives can I impact with all this information that I have.
Exactly.
And I can't do that hanging out at the local bar in the town that I grew up in 5 days a week.
Exactly.
So I guess I just said I grew up in a bar in the town that I grew up in. Let me clarify that. I missed a few words.
I practically did.
And like I said, there's no shame in having a simple life and loving. It's about how happy does this make you?
Mm-hmm.
That life does not make me happy. Helping people gives me this amazing energy, which, as you know, with somebody with chronic conditions, energy can be hard to come by, especially if you're not really loving your life.
Right.
And that positive energy kind of feeds itself, and it feeds off of other people. So every time I get to have a conversation with someone, it instead of draining me, it rejuvenates.
It's the law of attraction.
Exactly. We're gonna have to have another conversation someday. Absolutely. And what's funny is when I was in graduating high school, 96, that year the movie The Craft came out. Okay. I'm not going to get into a whole religious thing about this, but I was fascinated by the fact that they were making things basically happen at their will. Now, it's a movie and they embellished and, of course, made it movie-like. But I was fascinated kind of by this notion, and I didn't understand it all that well. So I kind of started digging into Wicca. And honestly, all of those different things kind of go hand in hand. They just have different names for them.
Mm-hmm.
Like some people say God, some people say universe, some people say, spirit, some people say inner guide. There's lots of different words for the same kind of phenomenon. And we can, again, I would love to have a conversation about that another day. But anyways, all of these things started kind of being attracted into my life because my energy about myself had shifted. Now, I'm not saying I knew I'm going to study a lot of attraction and this is going to happen and I'm going to make, no, it was more like hindsight. I'm looking back and going, oh, now I understand why when I did this, and this happened. And I met this person, and then kind of connecting the dots backwards. The whole hindsight is, 2020 kind of thing.
Right.
And all of this kind of kept leading me to new people. So in 2019, I met Evan Carmichael. He's a YouTuber, thought leader, amazing, humble person. Another someone I've gotten to know fairly well. Was a mentor to me, and I started my Unbreakable campaign in 2019 in part because of him.
Mm-hmm.
And that is basically it's a platform where people are sharing their stories of overcoming in the hopes of, and this is way back before I was doing kind of podcast interviews, but my hope at that point was the underlying mission, honestly, was suicide prevention.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was seeing so much, especially in the chronic illness community, people were taking their own lives because the pain was just too much. And these people didn't have access to the resources or know that, like I didn't, that there was hope and that they could get better if they were able to do some different things.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea is that by everybody sharing their different stories of kind of overcoming, this provides a place for people who are feeling kind of lost and hopeless or in those beginning stages of diagnosis or are suffering from some, severe depression, can come and see like, oh, this person was able to do this and this person was able to do that, and kind of piece together maybe somewhat of a roadmap, or at least some beginning steps to take to kind of get to where it is they want to go on their own healing journey. And really, for a lot of them, even knowing that healing is possible, because like I said before, I didn't know I could heal from all of the stuff I was dealing with. I thought I was going to be medicated for the rest of my life, and that's just kind of how things were going to be.
Right.
So that happened in 2019. And that's how I ended up meeting my mentor, David Meltzer, who literally helped me accelerate and change and heal my life faster than anyone or anything that I've ever encountered. I remember talking to him and saying, I reached out to him about the campaign and about this business I was trying to build, because he's a business coach, among other things. And I had like a 5-minute conversation with him. I'm telling him all this stuff. I want to do this and I want to do this and I want to do this. And he goes, "You're not doing anything until you get your health in order." And I'm like, whack, like big smack in the face. Like, but it was like, wow, you're right. I was at probably the sickest in my life at that point, just trying to kind of starting this healing process from Humira. I was like, that's not what I was looking for, but that's exactly what I needed. And thank you. And that's when I really started working with him, which has, I can't even describe the amazing, amazing opportunities that have come from, because I could have run the other way, right? I could have been like, well, screw you, or sorry, like, no, I'm doing this thing and if you're just not the right person I need to talk to. But I was like, something told me, like, this man gave me his time, and he's a business coach. Like, he could have been like, well, pay me thousands of dollars and I'll train you how to do this thing.
Right. And
it wasn't like, I felt something different with him, like this connection. And he talked about it maybe about a year later. We were on a live in the private coaching group. And he's like, I didn't care that when he came here to Pittsburgh, and I got to meet him in person about a week after that. And it was really phenomenal. And he was talking about a year later. He's like, I didn't care that you were broke. I didn't care that we were in foreclosure at this point. I didn't care that you were sick. I didn't care about any of these things, like, in a judgmental way. He was like, I knew if I helped you, something amazing was going to come out of it. And that sounds kind of braggy, but like, that's exactly what's happened. I found out 3 weeks ago, my fibromyalgia is gone.
Wow.
So we have a little inside joke kind of thing, this hashtag. And every time I get on, I'm like, this shit works. If you listen to him, and it's not like some crazy concepts. This is stuff that I believe a lot of us should learn as kids. And it's gratitude, saying thank you, being thankful, change, having a positive outlook, mindset. He talks about finding the love, the light, and the lessons in everything. We had a fire here in June. The same son I was telling you about, his first e-bike. We had a storm. We had several explosions out in the front of the house that afternoon in the evening. It was like a branch landed on the high wires. So it was like intermittently kind of exploding.
Wow. And
then later at 10:30 that night, my son was outside charging his phone with his e-bike, and the battery started to smoke and exploded. And we had multiple fire, like, he could have been killed.
Jeez.
And I remember trying to reconcile this, right? And like, he's okay. And he's getting checked out in the ambulance, and people are coming up to us. And I'm high risk. So I'm normally staying away from everyone. I'm hugging my neighbors. I'm crying. And I just kept saying, thank you, because our neighbors, some of them we hadn't talked to in months because of COVID, came running with fire extinguishers to see it, to try to help and, do what they could. I've got goosebumps because I remember talking to David. There's like a little gnat or something flying around. David, that was Sunday. Monday, I got in a group, and he could tell like I was a lot more somber than usual. And I'm like, so I'm just trying to understand this, and the debris was left in the driveway. And when I talked to like the EPA or whatever, they're like, don't touch anything, stay away from it, keep your kids away from it, because we don't know if everything's combusted and it could go back up in flames. So I've got this real fear. So like anxiety, but like a real fear that something like there was nothing I could do about it. So it's like this perfect opportunity to learn how to deal with the fear effectively and in a way that I wasn't going to push myself back into like OCD or full, one panic attack after another. And I'm talking to him, and he said something to the effect of, I'm really proud of you because, a year ago, you wouldn't have been looking for what you could learn from this. It would have been, I was never really, why did this happen to me kind of person, but I would have been in a very different state of mind. Let's just say it wouldn't be trying to find some kind of lesson in the fact that my kid almost got blown to pieces, like it just would have been different. And I remember at that point looking up and seeing I had a Gabby Bernstein's book, Transforming Your, what's it called? The title, it's Transforming Fear to Faith, but there's the Universe Has Your Back, Transforming Fear to Faith. I know I kind of went off on a tangent here, but anyways,
that's okay.
The point is that this was another opportunity that had come into my life. Had I not done all of this other work, the universe would not have put this opportunity in my, for me to learn from, because it wouldn't have been a learning opportunity. It would have been another running away opportunity at that point. I would have just run from whatever it was and tried to stuff the feelings and try to be like, I don't want to feel this. And that was the first time I consciously let myself just sit with the fear and feel it and let it kind of go through me. And rather than going into a full-fledged fibro flare or RA flare, which is what normally would happen in times of severe stress like that, by allowing this to kind of just move through me. And I was still afraid. Like, I'm not going to lie. There was still a potential fire hazard in my driveway for a week. But it was, I'm doing everything I can and I'm fully protected. And if something happens, it's to provide me with another lesson. And a lot of people looked at me like I'm kind of like losing it when I say that. But when I realized 3 days later that my body was not in excruciating pain from a flare, I was like, holy crap. This was probably the best lesson that I've learned my entire life, was I have full control over whether or not I feel like this, just by, allowing myself to feel things, allowing them to come through me, not resisting them, focusing on the positives, being grateful for what good did come out of that, which was my son was okay. There's a lot of property damage, but it didn't have so much as a scratch on him. By the grace of God or the universe or whatever, he was completely fine. And it's just, I don't know. It's crazy the things you can learn when you open yourself up to learning them.
Yeah. You touched on so many things. Number one of my sayings is gratitude changes your attitude. And number two, I mean, even though you didn't outright say the words, the implications were there. You have to kind of be more selective with the people you surround yourself with. I have people that to this day, they're like family to me. And if they were in need, I would be there for them, but I don't hang out with them because they're still drinking, they're still doing the drugs, and they're not going anywhere. They're content, just doing their 9 to 5 and coming home and popping open a beer. And that's not me. I have to look out for my health and my spiritual well-being. That's something else that I've kind of grasped to, is the spiritual side of my life. And I'd like to say I love them. I'm not judging them. If that's the way you want to live your life, that's fine. I can't live my life that way. And once you start looking for positive stuff and you live your life in a positive way, you attract things that are positive. Just the same thing as with negative. That's why they say misery loves company. You're in that woe is me attitude, you gravitate to the people that feel the same way. My circle has gotten smaller in one sense, but in another sense, it's grown because I'm meeting these people that they have goals. They have the means to get to their goals, and they have so many positive things to share. And I'm not looking to surround myself with yes men. If I'm doing something that I can change, tell me. My ego's not so big that I can't change. That's something people need to realize. Just put ego aside. Sometimes somebody has some advice that you should listen to. It's like I might know something you don't, you know something I don't. Doesn't mean that either one of us are better than the other. It's just you know what you know, I know what I know, and we share these things. I could go on and on. I've already thought in my head, I've got 10, 15 different podcasts we can do just from this conversation alone. I just, empower yourself. Look for the positives in this world. Stop saying I can't, because, if you just
That's
change.
Swear word. I just had a huge discussion about, it's actually up on YouTube. You can watch it. And I get excited about things, but I've been doing this show with actually, he's my coach that's helping me. He's my coaching coach. And he started a new show on YouTube, and I wanted to support him too. And I got on there, and he was talking about, and he was like, men can't. And every time he said it, I was like, I'm keeping my mouth shut. And finally I was like, stop telling me that they can't. I'm like, and he kind of looked at me because I got really excitable. I wasn't angry, but I'm like, I said, I'm sorry, that word, even my kids from they weren't allowed to say it. And this was before all of this other stuff happened to me. Can't takes away personal responsibility. And it also takes away, your ability, your personal responsibility, and it also convinces you not to even try.
Exactly.
And I'm like, I said, so stop it. So anyway, sorry, I get so worked up about that word because, and part of it was probably because there were a lot of things that I thought I couldn't, that were completely impossible. But I was also trying. I was trying different things. I don't know. It's a buzzword for me. It's a word that like I said, don't tell me you can't unless you've at least attempted to do something. So go ahead. I apologize.
Oh, no.
That word for me. I'm glad you said that, because I'm like, yes, somebody gets it.
Just don't say that you can't do something. Just say that's something I haven't done yet.
Yeah, or I'm gonna try, or let me figure this out, or could you help me with this? There's so many other different things. I don't know. I can't literally jump out my window right now and fly, in my state right now. We all know that.
Right.
However, there's multiple different ways to go about doing something like that. You know what I mean? But yeah, I think it gets to me when people say I can't before they've even attempted to do something. And I also want to say something else you said about the ego, in a spiritual sense. And I just learned this summer after all of this happened, because I went book crazy and I read 12 books in a matter of 8 weeks or something.
Mm-hmm.
That ego in spiritual terms literally just means fearful thought. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
I did not know that.
To think of. I didn't either until a few months ago. Gabby's really great. Gabby Bernstein's really great about breaking things down in a way that most people can really grasp some really more complicated concepts, so that people can, she can reach more people and impact more people. And I'm really glad she does do it that way.
I used to tell people to have a vision board of the things that you want in life and things like that. And I was talking to another life coach about this, and he says, well, the vision board is great. He says, but what you need to do is put on that board all the things you have accomplished, and look at that and see how far you've come. You don't think about it, but remember, you learned to ride a bike, these kind of things. At one point you didn't know how to do it. Now you know how to do it. You don't even have to think about it anymore. When I first started doing the YouTube videos, I I did not know how to edit videos, and I got a program, and I was determined I was going to learn how to do it, because the person that was supposed to edit for me just flaked out on me, and I was like, I guess I'm going to have to do this myself. I would get a YouTube video, I'd watch a few seconds of it, I'd pause it, and then I'd do whatever it said to do on it. And I just kept doing that over and over again. So it went from taking me 5 hours to edit a video to down to what, maybe sometimes 30 minutes, according to how much I have to actually get in and do. And I can see from when I first started to where I am now, how all these things have improved. I mean, even the way I conduct my interviews. When I first started, I'd write down all these questions, and it sounded so robotic. I'd ask the question, and then I'm sitting there waiting for that pause so I can ask the next question, not even realizing sometimes I was asking questions to something they had already mentioned. So now just one day I said, you know what, this is not working. I'm just going to wing it. The heck with it. I'm going to wing it. And it turned out to be a real conversation. And people can tell if it's scripted or if you're just having a conversation. Just don't say that you can't. Just, you have to try. Or as Yoda would say, do or do not. There is no try.
Yeah, and I think too, a lot of people have these really high expectations. I'm one of them. I'm a recovering perfectionist. Again, I had OCD. I was also the kid that picked things up super quickly. Everything I picked up, I was good at. And I know that sounds super conceited, but I'm seeing it now in my almost 5-year-old, where he's doing things better than his older siblings, like right off the bat. And it took seeing it in him to allow it to be so for me. I know that sounds funny, but I was so stuck in imposter syndrome, and like, there's, I don't want to sound conceited, but I now understand it. But that caused problems when I was doing something, like I almost wouldn't attempt something if I didn't think I was going to be good at it, because it felt like I have to be good at everything. And then it caused even more problems later on when I was doing stuff that was completely out of my sphere of knowledge at all. Like learning how to write an email sequence and all this tech stuff that I was doing a couple of years ago. It's a campaign that was driving me literally insane. And I was mad at myself and thinking there was something wrong with me because I couldn't understand how to do these things. And then when I would follow the instructions and it wasn't working, and I'm going, it was always me, like, what is wrong with you? What's wrong with you? It was kind of stuff that I was fighting, having a back and forth, demon and angel conversation. It was like, think positively. What's wrong with you? Think positively. What's wrong with you? I'm like, no, like, I'm gonna take a break from this.
What you mean?
But yeah, we have this. There's such an instantaneous, like, way about society now. Unfortunately, everything's instant. Yeah. There's no waiting, there's no putting work into things are shortcut so much, and that's great in a lot of things. There's no reason we have to drag out certain things and make them take longer than they need to take out. But for a lot of different things, we're skipping this whole, like, learning process, how, like, learning how to learn even. And that's, again, we could probably have another conversation. But I love what you said about the vision board. I'm literally looking over here because I've got my cork board in the box to make my new vision board. And it's going to go up behind me here eventually. And actually, I can actually show you these. My daughter's used to call me the happy hippie because she didn't understand what I was doing when I was making all these changes. She's apparently come around somewhat. I don't know if it's going to let me show this to you because I've got that blurred background. Probably not. Nope. I don't know. It says the power of yet. On one side, they're little posters, and the other one says your mindset matters. She's like, we saw this, her and her boyfriend, we saw this and we thought of you. And I'm like, wow. So your kids are paying attention to what you do, not necessarily what
they watch
say.
you. They watch you.
And even though she was ridiculing me for the first 2.5 years of me kind of getting into this positive mindset stuff, as she called it. She called me the happy hippie or the happy hippie. She was so resistant to it. Why are you so happy? And I'm like, why not? Why not? I would rather not be miserable. Thank you very much. But part of the vision board that's going to go up around it too, the stuff that I want to do, the stuff I'm going to do, that I'm going to attract into my life at one point or another, unless it's really, really not meant for me. And on the other side is a belief board, which was actually suggested to me by Evan Carmichael, which is exactly what you just described. Because so I was on a TV show in January, David Meltzer's TV show. It's called 2 Minute Drill. It's a pitch competition show.
Okay.
And so back in November of last year, I'm kind of hinting around that I want to do this. I was building an upcycling company at that point. I wanted to build this company that was going to rival Etsy, mostly because of all of these programs that I wanted to build when I made all the money for kids in education. And we're in a private coaching group, and I asked probably like the 16th different question about how to write a pitch at this point. And the session is over, and he goes, well, anybody who hasn't signed up or applied for 2 Minute Drill needs to apply, because we're picking, this weekend or something. And that means you, Bonnie. And I'm like, now I have to do it. I was like, I wasn't actually going to do it. Like I did not believe I belonged there. A lot of these people had $1 million contracts already, and NFL backers and all. And I'm building like this thing that I kind of was migrating from Etsy basically. And I ended up applying. I waited 3 more days, but I ended up applying just so that I could say that I applied. And I was like, I'm done. Like, I don't have to do anything else, until I got the email like 2 days later that said I was picked. And I'm like running around my house screaming, freaking out. I was so excited. I was like, I'm gonna be on TV. I'm gonna be on TV. What do you do? What do you mean? I'm like, all you need to know is I'm gonna be on TV, because like, again, nobody in my sphere builds business. And I'm like, I'm gonna do a pitch. Like, what do you mean a pitch? Like a pitch? And I'm like, no, I'm like, never mind. I'm gonna be on TV. I'll explain the details to you later. And it was funny. I ended up writing this pitch, but I'm having all of this kind of like my only focus at that point was writing the absolute best pitch I could. I still had no idea how to write a pitch. I had to research it and kind of go on David's website and follow all these different things to learn how to do this. But I didn't want to disappoint him. I didn't want to let myself down. And so after it ends up coming in December, and we record, and I end up winning $50K in cash and prizes for having the best pitch. And it aired about a month later, 6 weeks later, in January. And all of a sudden, I had like reverse imposter syndrome. It was really weird. Oh. It was like, and maybe it's not reverse, but it was just like after the fact, I'm going, how did I get here? Like, I'm now talking to like VA services, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that and all these different business things. I'm like, I don't even know what this stuff is, but thank you, because it's part of the prize package. And I'm like, I really felt like I didn't belong, because I didn't understand. Like, everything was foreign to me. Like, I learned about it, but it was all foreign. And I'm watching these other people's pitches and the different things, and I'm going, I still really felt like a complete outsider. But one of the suggestions my friend Evan Carmichael said was, make a belief board. So I was telling you all this kind of backstory. Make a belief board. How did you get from where you were to where you are now? And I'm still banging my head against the wall. I'm like, because it was like 2 weeks from the time that I applied and then that I won. I'm like, what do you mean what I do? I spent 2 weeks writing a pitch, like nothing else but writing and rehearsing this pitch. I have like 400 recordings of me on my phone just because you had 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then they cut you off, hence 2 Minute Drill. So I was trying to build this belief board, and luckily my coach I explained to her, I'm like, I don't understand what I'm supposed to be putting on here. Like, I wasn't getting it. But they helped me understand that, like you said, it was all of the little things. It was doing my sleep meditations. It was doing my stretching. It was taking my vitamins. It was paying attention to my nutrition, taking my protein, thinking positively. The 9 million affirmations I repeated literally every single minute for 3 weeks straight. Yeah. They're printed and, taped to my mirror. Like, one says, we have your back, signed the universe. One says, just breathe. And the other one says, you effing got this. because those meant the most to me at that point. Like, that's what I needed to remember. But it's such a powerful tool for when you're feeling like you can't do the next thing. Going, well, I already did this and this and this and this and this and this, and I aspire to do this and this and this and this and this, and I didn't think I could do this or this or this or this or this, and here we are, and it's on the board now, and I've accomplished that thing. So I think it's really, like I said, really phenomenal. That was just, I wanted to give you kind of an example of how I've used it in my life to, I felt really lost after that show. I felt like that was it. It was a fluke. I was never going to do anything that amazing ever again. And it's just not the case. I just had an amazing opportunity to actually pop up yesterday. I got to talk to Les Brown. I don't know if you know Les Brown. He's a famous motivational speaker. Anybody who doesn't know who he is, go look him up on YouTube. He will change your life instantaneously. But he's my absolute favorite ever since I saw a quick video that he did on YouTube, or not YouTube, Facebook, like about 4 years ago, when all this other stuff started coming into my life.
Right.
And I got to talk to him yesterday on Clubhouse.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, like, I literally lost my voice, like was losing my voice halfway through because of the excitement, because he's been on my vision board for 3 years now. Like, my people I will meet vision board, I've like 2 different parts of my vision board. And even though it wasn't in person, it was still just as impactful.
Right, right.
Like, this is as close as I'm gonna get for now. Like, I'm immunocompromised, so I'm not going anywhere. But to get to do that, to have that exchange with such an amazing person was just, it was mind blowing. But it's starting to get just slightly less mind blowing. Like, I'm starting to learn to, and anybody who studies the law of attraction and really gets into it, and like you start to expect these good things to happen, and then the more they start showing up. So I'm learning to not act like everything is such a huge, even though it was a surprise, like, it's not such a huge surprise, and then I should continue to expect these miracles to happen, because being in that energy and that vibration, like you were saying, will continue to attract these miracles, into my life. So yeah, it's been a wild ride. I know we covered a lot of different things.
Oh,
today.
no. I was actually going to suggest, if you were up for it, to maybe come on a couple more times so we can discuss more of this, because this is fascinating. I mean, we have kind of gone over our time, but that's fine. I think a lot of this people need to hear. And now I'm your favorite motivational speaker. Right? Well, if I could make a suggestion to people, is, our minds are geared for comfort. We don't put ourselves in uncomfortable positions because, we don't like to be uncomfortable, but you should get comfortable with the uncomfortable. You step out of your little box, your comfort zone, and you do things you've never done before. And that opens up so much more of your life. You get this confidence you didn't realize you had inside of you. One of the reasons why they make you make your bed in the military when you first get up, it's not so much that you're being neat and everything. It's you've accomplished that first thing of the day.
Yes.
And that's the way you need to look at it. You know what? I got up this morning, I made the bed, I made coffee, I made breakfast, I put the dishes away, I got dressed, I'm ready for my work or whatever it is that you do. That, look at the things that you have done, not what you haven't done. Just look at the things you haven't done. You just say, I'm going to do those things. I'm going to get, once again, this is not bragging. I don't want people to get that idea that we're trying to brag. We're trying to show you that there are things that can come to your life. Like you said, at first they're fun, exciting, I can't believe it. And then you're just like, oh, now you kind of expect it. I have met so many wonderful people that Otherwise, if I hadn't been doing this, I probably would have never met them. And some of them are famous. I'm not going to mention their names, but I have their numbers in my phone now. I can call them, I can text them. If I'm feeling down, I say, hey, I need some words of encouragement. And, when you get I really love you, brother, from somebody like that, that means a lot.
It does. I remember that the first time I texted him something, text him something. And he said, I'm so proud of you. Now this was in the first year of, first 6 months even, I think of me working with him as a mentor. And I was like taken completely aback. And I realized in that moment, that was the one thing that I always wanted to hear my father say to me that I never heard. He was very much he wasn't a bad person, but he had so much, he believed in me so much that anything less than perfect just kind of wasn't like, well, you got to be, why, what happened to the A? It wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
And I don't think his intention was ever to make me he's not here any longer. But I don't think he had bad intentions. He just didn't express what he was trying to say very well.
Right.
So, but like you said, when somebody says something like that to you, you're like, wow, like, thank you. That's exactly what I didn't know I needed, kind of thing. And you're right. I wanted to you said about the brain, we're not wired for comfort. The reason that there's an evolutionary reason actually behind that. And our brains are just wired to keep us safe. Our brains have not caught up to the fact that we are, walking, talking, thinking kind of human beings, and have not evolved kind of with the rest of us quite yet. And so when we get in a situation that we observe, are afraid of, or observe to be some sort of danger, whether it's physical danger or not, our brains that cause us to retreat, fight or flight, freeze, fawn. I won't get into that right now, but that's a lot of what I teach, is how to manage those fear responses. But you're right, we need to get out of our comfort zones, because it's, again, kind of like the graded exposure therapy I mentioned in the beginning. The more we start doing these things that scare us a little by little, the less we're afraid of them.
Exactly.
I could have never been on TV a decade ago, and it wasn't live, it was virtual, but it was still just as terrifying, and it was still heart pumping and adrenaline, and it was crazy. And it's putting yourself out there, and doing something you've never done before, kind of thing. And I remember the first time I spoke to somebody semi-famous on Clubhouse, I about died. And it's not even, it's only audio. But in my brain, I'm equating it to the last time, which was on TV. And your brain starts making you want to run away, basically, or shut down, or whatever it is. So yeah, there's an evolutionary reason that happens, and what we can do to kind of get past, trick the brain. But we can definitely have a conversation about all of this. I would love to come back and talk about.
Please. I would really love that.
Focus on a couple of different things, since we got to talk about a range of topics today. I'd love to share with your audience too some ways they can help themselves with their anxiety.
Yes.
Because it's really about putting the work in. Like anybody out there, I don't have a magic cure for you. I don't have a magic button. Honestly, what I'm going to teach you is everything that I've learned in the past 4.5, 5 years, about how to manage and then eradicate a lot of it. And you and I are both living proof that that it's possible. And it has so many amazing health benefits besides just not feeling anxious and on edge all the time and afraid of things. Healing my fibro came out of that. I fully believe that, because fibro I know that there's all kinds of information and they're still trying to kind of figure out, but in my opinion, it's brought on by stress. Some people after sickness or a car accident or this or that, the other, there's lots of different reasons, but some type of really intensive stressful situation, whether it's prolonged chronic stress or some one-off thing, like, like a physical accident. So again, I'm not a doctor, so I can't say that and everything that I've seen and noticed and people I've talked to, that's kind of the underlying commonality between all of them.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so, and you said hypertension and diabetes and blood pressure, all that stuff. Hypertension is high blood pressure. All those different things. Cortisol production, which makes you put on weight from prolonged stress and anxiety. It's crazy.
I'm gonna tell you. Well, all those years that I spent drinking, and then there was the drugs I was pumping into me that were not legal, but all these things I was doing to destroy myself, and I didn't think that highly of myself. I think that's why I was destroying myself, and I didn't surround myself with the right people. And now that I've changed my circle of friends. I've married a wonderful woman that actually cares about me and helps me with my health, and things that my ex-wife didn't do for me. Um, she's opened up a whole new world to me. Travel. I mean, here I was once again in my comfort zone, living in a little town called Baytown, and right outside of Houston. Been there all my life, and then started coming up here to Austin to visit her family and friends, and fell in love with it. I was away from all the refineries, and I was around nature and beautiful clear creeks and rivers and lakes, and I was like, you know what, the heck with it. I'm moving, and been here for going on 4 years now. And I miss my family and friends down there, but I'm near nature. That's where I ground myself.
Yes.
This is what I love to look outside my window and see rabbits running across my front yard, that kind of thing. But anything worth having is worth working for.
Absolutely.
So, get out of your comfort zone. Think, what do you really want out of this life? Do you want to be happy? Because if you search out to be happy, you will be happy. If you search out to be miserable, you will be miserable. It's like they say, if you're looking for something to go wrong, it will go wrong. So, Bonnie, thank you so much for your time. You really lifted me up this morning, and I'm serious. I'd really love to have you back on, maybe a couple more times. There's so much more that you can share, and I think it would benefit the audience. So
absolutely, I'd love to. I'm glad we finally got to connect after our initial kind of back and forth and kind of craziness. I was like, okay, this will work. Again, I kind of gave it up to the universe. I was like, this will work out when it's meant to. Yeah, for sure. I think that would be a great idea, an awesome idea. I love that I have had all of these different experiences, because it helps me connect with a wider range of people. Some people don't like the universe stuff. They don't want to hear about it. It's like, all right, that's okay. Got lots of other stuff we can talk about.
Honestly, and this has been said before, but even if God wasn't real, he's necessary. So, one, for the moral aspect of it, and number two, it's nice to think that you have someone that you can speak to in your time of need. And I mean, I'm not going to push my spirituality on other people. I'll just say that it has changed my life. I actually was a preacher for about 5 years, and then I had a falling out with my preacher, and I totally left the church and went back to doing the same old stuff I did before, back to the drinking and the drugs and running around and whoring around, that kind of thing. And it took, number one, my first wife left me for a younger man, but and that was right after I had my heart attack. But then it came down to the actual divorce, and she was doing some things she shouldn't have been doing. I was getting my life together. The kids were at stake. I ended up getting custody of my kids, even though everybody said that's not going to happen. They always give it to the wife. You know what? I said, I'll take my chances. I got custody of my boys. I had to change for them, be the person that I needed to be for them. And it can happen for anyone. You just have to want it. Just have to want it.
Yeah, I think it's intimidating for intimidating for most people in the very beginning. And I'm not going to go off on another tangent in another half hour right now, but like, you're right. You just have to want it. And then you've got to make a decision to start taking baby steps. Because nobody else can want it or do it for you. You know, they can, but they can't do it for you. You know, it's helpful to have those supportive people in your corner that want to see you win.
You also have to let go of the bitterness in your life. Forgive people. You know, I made my mistakes too when it came to my first wife, so I can't blame her for all of it. You know, she's moved on. She's got her a good man, and I really like the guy, and he's good to my kids. And I mean, they're adults now, but I mean, still they're my kids.
Right.
You know, so we can't dwell on those things. I mean, you know, I had my problems with my father. He's passed away. I've had to let that go. And if anything, do it for your own sake. It gives you, if you hold on to that bitterness, you're giving somebody else your power.
Yeah, and that's a huge component to anxiety people don't realize. So I'm also writing my first, well, I'm done writing it. Getting ready to launch my first coaching program. It's called 21 Days to Calm Anxiety. And forgiveness is a huge part of module 3 for sure. And it's talked about in module, actually it's in module 2 and module 3. And one is forgiving yourself and the other is forgiving others. And I remember asking when that fire happened, asking David, like, well, what is your definition of forgive? Because this is something we grew up and it's like, we just kind of were supposed to know what it meant, which is, you know, we were kind of led to believe that it meant forget and what the other person did was okay. And that's not really the case. Forgiveness just means to make peace with. And like you said, to let it go. Yeah. So I do teach that as part of this coaching program, is that that's one of the most important things that you can do when you're trying to kind of heal anything, is the gratitude and then forgiveness.
Exactly.
So I could talk to you for hours.
I'm telling you, it's like, you know, it's like those friends you haven't seen in a while, and you visit them, and then you say, okay, well, we have to go now, and you still end up talking an hour before you leave.
Yeah. I have friends like that. I have, yeah, exactly right. Like, I haven't seen you in 10 years. We could talk for 6 hours straight and still stand on the porch for an hour in the freezing cold and stand at the car for another hour, start the car, sit in the car for an hour. Yeah. Definitely.
Oh yeah. Okay. So, how can people find you? And, but I will put that in the description, but if you could let everybody know.
Yeah. So my website is BonnieRoseTheACoach.com. I know that's fairly long. So I am on all of social media still as Posh Notions, because I'm still making kind of a transition from what I was doing to what I'm doing now. So people can still find me. And if anybody's looking to get on my website and you're on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or whatever, and you want to look up Posh Notions, and just DM me the word coaching, and I can send you all the information about that. Because there's a plans page, there's an interviews page, there's all these different, like, what, / this, / that, and it ends up being so long. So if anybody's interested in either working with me one-on-one on their anxiety or getting into my coaching program, just DM me the word coach or coaching on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. I'm fairly easy to find.
I had all these different things for people to go to. I finally got a link tree. It's like, it's easier. Just go to my link tree.
Yeah, I have an about me page or about page, something like that, on my website. But I did realize that, like Bonnie Rose, the A coach is still fairly long, but I couldn't get the anxiety coach or the A coach, or it was fun trying to buy a domain for what I wanted to do.
People don't
and that
realize
everybody knows my name and what I do right there in the title, right there on the website. There we go. So, but you're right. Yeah, it was interesting trying to buy a domain for this. So I thank you so much for your time in this wonderful conversation and all of the extra time. And I'm glad it worked out. And I don't have anything else until 2:00 here today. So it worked out really well that we were able to go over. Didn't feel constricted by the time limits. So.
Well, we'll figure out a time you can come back, because there's so much more we could cover. I've still got all these things running through my head right now, and like we'd be here another 2 hours if I tried. But thank you. Thanks to everyone that tunes in, that supports us. All you subscribers, you're not just subscribers to me. You'd have no idea what it means to me. And if you've come here for the first time, thank you for dropping by. I hope you'll come back. I hope you'll hit that subscribe button. And until the next time, peace and take care.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, and on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network